When Donald Trump was inaugurated as America's 47th president recently, these were the first words out of his mouth during his speech. The golden age of America begins now. A golden age, according to dictionary.com, is an idyllic, often imaginary pastime of peace, prosperity, and happiness. Now, I'll say this, I hope Donald Trump's promises of a golden age, I hope those do pan out. We're going to see. But there actually is a golden age coming, and the entire world is going to experience it someday. I'm talking about the millennial reign of Christ. It's something that will certainly not be imaginary, and it's going to cover the whole planet for 1,000 years. And so what is the world going to be like during that time? That time when Jesus rules, when sin is not tolerated, and we're not going to be held back by greed and war and selfishness the way that we are today. That's what you're going to find all about today on the Cross References podcast. Welcome to the Book of Ezekiel, a cross-references Bible study, where we learn how every small piece of the Bible tells one big story and how they all connect to the cross and Christ. My name is Luke Taylor, and I'll say this for Donald Trump, whether you love the guy or not, he was by far not the first president to make this promise upon assuming office. Lots of presidents have made guarantees of economic prosperity. Bill Clinton said it. Dwight Eisenhower said it. FDR, he came into office promising a new deal for the American people. Herbert Hoover's promise, he said, I'm going to put a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. That's what he told America whenever he was elected in 1928. Sadly, right after he was elected, there was an economic crash in 1929 known as the Great Depression. And so I don't know enough about history if that was all his fault. It probably wasn't. But, just worked out poorly for the guy, Herbert Hoover's presidency, to be at such a terrible time in American history. Anyway, I'm just saying there's lots of people, even right here in America, who've come into power promising a coming golden age. We know it's going to happen again, that someday when the Antichrist gets put into power, he is going to come touting the dawn of an age of peace and prosperity like nothing that's ever happened in history. Now, that is going to fall apart faster than it did for Herbert Hoover, okay? Right after the Antichrist gets into power, war is going to break out across the earth. Inflation is going to skyrocket across the entire planet. And, it's going to be so bad. We'll be looking back at the Biden years with nostalgia, just wishing the prices that we had back then. It's going to be so much worse when the Antichrist gets into power. But the good news is things are going to get wrecked someday on planet Earth. But Jesus is going to wipe all of that away whenever he arrives on the scene, the second coming of Christ. And so that's what we've really been talking about here is the 1,000 years after Jesus returns. What is it going to be like on planet Earth? And so that's what we've been going through here on the podcast. And so if you're new, I'll just recap where we've been for the past few months. We're in the book of Ezekiel. We're in chapters 40 through 48. 2 weeks ago, we finished up chapter 46. And so we've only got 2 chapters left in the book of Ezekiel. And towards the end of today's lesson, I'll tell you where things are going over the next few weeks. The podcast is actually just about done. We're just about tying everything up on the podcast. But before I finish up Ezekiel, I'm taking this week and next just to get a couple of final comments in on what the world is going to be like during the millennial reign of Christ, during this 1,000-year period of peace and no war. And we talked a few weeks ago, we did an episode talking about society and governance in the millennium. And I kind of focused more in that one on the role of government during that time. And this time, where I left off on that one was I was talking about society, how people are, if you think of the Industrial Revolution that America went through in the 1900s, how quickly we advanced technologically and economically in our country, the boom that we had, that really turned us into a superpower on the world stage. It's going to be like that for the planet in the millennial reign of Christ. We will make advances in science and tech Anything that humanity has been capable of, all the good things at least, anything we've been capable of before the millennium, Jesus is going to take all that to the next level. Century after century, we're going to advance crazy. And so there's going to be so much discovery and creation that happens during the millennial reign of Christ. And so it'll be a time where the world is not going to be held back like it has been here in the current age, we could say. It's not going to be held back anymore. Those things that derailed us and caused us to regress and caused us to slow production, the world's not going to have to deal with those inhibitions. So we're going to talk about that today. That's what we've been discussing. So today it's health, wealth, and prosperity in the millennium. And I picked that title because, that is what we're going to be talking about literally, but you often hear those words associated with something that's called the prosperity preaching or the prosperity gospel. And there's a reason that I want to draw some of our attention to that, because if you're new, I'll tell you this up front, I'm not one of those prosperity preacher guys. It's not that I rail on them all the time, but I am going to comment on some of their activities today because it's going to relate to the subject matter that we'll be talking about. So we're going to get to that at the end of today's lesson. Let's go ahead and get into it. So when Jesus comes back, it's going to be the dawn of a new age for planet Earth. Things are going to be very different, unlike any time the world has ever seen. And so to explain some ways that that's going to be, let's talk about wealth for a minute, okay? Wealth in the millennium. When we talk about how everyone in the millennium, I don't know if I should say everyone, because I don't know exactly how it's going to work on an individual level, but there will be mass opportunity for people to be wealthy, to have all their needs met in the millennial reign of Christ. But this wealth is not just going to pop out of the ground. People are going to have to work for it. Okay, we're not just going to print a bunch of money so everybody has $1 million. All right, that's not going to do anything good for the economy. That's what causes inflation and all that, just printing money crazy. So they're not going to be just printing money just so everybody can be rich, okay? But people will be wealthy because the work that they do is going to accomplish so much. Amos 9:13, it says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes him who sows seed. The mountains shall drip sweet wine, and all the hills shall flow with it." Okay, so this is a section at the very end of the book of Amos. And if you go to about any of the prophets in the Bible, major prophets, minor prophets, any of the prophets, there is always a section toward the end of their book that kind of, or not always at the end, it can be sprinkled throughout. But there's always a section that's going to, at least one that's going to talk about the millennium, the millennial reign of Christ. And so for the book of Amos, it comes right here in the last, I think it's like the last 5 verses of the book. Suddenly they jump ahead to talking about the millennium. And so what is he saying right here in this verse? He is saying that in the millennium, plants will be growing faster than they can be picked. All right? There's not going to be like an off season. Stuff's just going to keep growing. There's just more and more produce is going to keep coming up. Okay, so I made a joke that the money won't be popping out of the ground. What I mean by that, hey, what you plant is going to be popping out of the ground. And if you pick it and sell it, you're going to make some money. So in that sense, maybe money is popping out of the ground, if you know what I mean. But we got to work for it. But in this new age, it's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to be successful. Okay, right now in the world, you can plant something and you can hope it'll grow. All right, if you plant enough of it, you know something's going to grow. But you can't always protect yourself against, hey, what if there's a drought? What if there's a big tornado and it rips up my field and I lose everything I've planted this year? I have nothing to harvest. My family's going to starve. Okay, stuff like that has been true in human history, but it's not going to be that way in the millennium. What you work toward, you will always reap what you sow. Okay, it won't just be a general rule like it is now, like kind of a law of the universe. Yes, you reap what you sow, but it's going to be like a very literal rule that you will get out of it what you put into it. Okay, and what you get out of it's going to be a lot, because in the millennium, stuff's going to grow. Not just, and it's speaking here of plants, but this is going to apply to any line of work, anything that you do. Okay, the world is going to be productive in that way. Now, maybe you say, what do you mean I'll be working in the millennium? I don't like to work. I want to go sit on a cloud and play a harp for all eternity. I want to sit back in my lazy chair, lazy boy recliner, and watch the Kansas City Chiefs for all eternity. What are you talking about that I want to be working? That doesn't sound right. Okay, well, then your theology's wrong, because work is not a curse of the fall. All right, the fall of man that happened in Genesis 3, guess what? The work had already started in Genesis 1 and 2. Mankind was already at work. Adam already was given work in the perfect world before the fall. And the Bible speaks clearly that in the world after, and the millennium is not even the new heavens and new earth, but even in the new heavens and new earth and in the millennial age and in every age, God has work for us to do. And so we're going to be working. It might be the millennium. Jesus might be king. But guess what? We're not just laying around while angels feed us grapes all day. Okay? We have work to do. We're going to be working. So work is not a curse of the fall. Now, there is a curse of the fall, if you look at Genesis 3, where it says that work's not going to be fun. Okay? Work is not going to be enjoyable all the time. All right? There's a lot of things that went wrong whenever the fall happened. And so work stopped being as enjoyable as it was before. But there is going to be work for us to do in the millennial age, and we won't have, at least when we get to the new heavens and new earth, the curse that's on work is going to be gone. So we will actually enjoy it. So you'll be busy. If you enjoy what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work, right? This morning, I'm quote unquote working for a church. I'm filling in as their interim pastor. And I'm doing this for a few months because their previous pastor left in February. And so I'm just stepping in right now to help. Since I'm an ordained minister, I'm helping them out and helping them to get through this season till a new permanent pastor is voted in. And so I've been doing that here this was my 4th Sunday doing that. And I'm having a blast. Like, I'm having the time of my life helping out at this church. Yes, it's kind of work. They're paying me. I'm doing work to prepare these sermons and to minister to the people and all that. Yes, it is, in a sense, it's a job. It's work that I'm doing, but I'm enjoying it so much, it doesn't feel like work. Okay? If you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. It's not going to feel like work. It's not going to be grueling. It's not going to be something that you wake up and if you feel burnt out, you don't want to get out of bed. Right now, I'm excited to go to bed at night because I get to wake up and go back to doing some of this church stuff. I look forward to being in the church. I look forward to working on my sermons for them. And when I do these Bible studies on YouTube, whenever I do my podcasts, I enjoy that. It doesn't even feel like work. It is something that's truly a joy for me to do. All right? So that in that sense, there is no curse on what I'm doing. Because as far as the curse that came in Genesis 3 on work, there is no curse on it because I'm having a blast. And I hope that whatever you're doing, whatever your job is, you who are listening, I hope you're having a blast. I hope you have found something that you really enjoy, that God put you here to do. You're fulfilling His will, no matter what that is you do. It doesn't have to be in ministry. It can, whatever it is that is your job, your profession, maybe, or if you're a stay-at-home mom or whatever it is, that might be your work. But I hope it's something that you enjoy doing. That's really a blessing to find that. And so anyway, where was I going with that here? So what I'm doing right now, I was saying it doesn't even feel like work. And I'm pointing that out because I want to say this. In the millennial age, and for us who go through eternity, we're still going to be busy, but it's not going to feel like work, okay? It's not going to be something that you hate doing, that's no fun, all right? It won't feel like work whenever you're doing it in the perfect world or even in the millennial reign of Christ. The curse on that work is going to be gone. So, all right, let me get back into it. Let's look at another verse. I didn't even mean to talk so long about that one. I need to move along here. Joel chapter 2, verse 24. The threshing floors shall be full of grain. The vats shall overflow with wine and oil. What this is saying is that everything's going to be available in abundance. All right, there's going to be so much of everything that you don't have to worry about lack. When I was in college, my last semester, and have you ever heard of when you're in college, sometimes you get something that they call senioritis, okay? And this is whenever you're a senior, you're about to graduate, and you really don't feel like doing the schoolwork anymore. Like you're just ready to get out of there And it can be so hard for some people to motivate yourself to study for your tests and complete your paperwork and all that. It can be, I don't know. You would think that you're so close to the end, you just feel like a boost of energy to like get it all done. But for me and for a lot of people, you get something that we call senioritis, and you just don't want to do anything. You're so close to being done, you just want to go ahead and quit working now on your schoolwork. So I remember in my last semester, I had put off taking my economics class, because it sounded boring. Okay, I don't really want anything to do with economics. I don't want to try to understand prices and I don't want to understand all that stuff. I don't even care. All right. I probably should, but it's just not a subject I felt like studying. Okay. It wasn't a class political science. I looked forward to my political science class. Literature class, I loved it. But economics, Econ 101, I put it off till my last semester. And anyway, there's only one, I guess I'm saying all this to say this. There's only one thing I remember from my economics class. One thing. Okay, and it's called the law of supply and demand. That when demand is high, supply is often low because everyone's buying something up. And if supply is high, that means demand is low because nobody's buying it. So there's a lot of supply, but not a lot of demand. All right, so that means in the wintertime, you need a snow shovel. Okay, there's going to be a lot of people buying snow shovels in the wintertime because they're getting ready for that snow that's going to fall. So the demand for snow shovels is going to be high. And so that means the supply of snow shovels is going to be low. So economically, this means whoever's making the snow shovels, they can jack those prices up so that, one, maybe not as many people will buy them all up, but two, they're going to get a lot of money out of these things because as the supply is getting lower, the value of those snow shovels gets higher. People are willing to pay more because they really need their snow shovel because it's going to snow next week because it's winter. So that's the law of how that's how the law of supply and demand works. That's how it works right now. So I guess where I'm going with this is that in the millennium, I don't really know how economics is going to work in the millennium, because in the millennium, there's just going to be abundant supply. You're going to have whatever it is that you need. You need a snow shovel. You don't need to worry that Walmart's run out of snow shovels. Go down there and get your snow shovel, okay? Because the threshing floors shall be full of grain, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. All right? So much supply is going to be available there. You're not going to have lack for anything. You'll be able to get whatever it is that your heart desires, that your heart needs. Whatever it is, it's going to be there. Abundant supply. Okay, moving on. And it's a good thing I didn't pay much attention in economics because apparently there's an expiration date. So whatever I learned in econ is not going to apply in the millennium. All right. Let's look at a section of verses here from Isaiah chapter 65. The end of Isaiah is interesting. Chapters 60 through 66 are pretty much all about the millennium, or they're about that transition period from going from the tribulation time, which I believe will be 7 years, going from the tribulation to the second coming of Christ into the millennium. Isaiah 60 through 66 tell the story. Not always chronologically, it kind of jumps around a little bit, but if you know the story of how it's supposed to play out according to Revelation, you can go through Isaiah 60 through 66. You can put it all together what it's talking about. So anyway, Isaiah 60 through 66, if you want to learn a lot about the millennium, go read those chapters. But chapter 65, verses 21 through 23, it says, "They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be." That rhymed. "And my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain or bear children for calamity, for they shall be the offspring of the blessed of the Lord, and their descendants with them." So I like these verses. I wanted to include them because it's what I was saying before. Right now, you might work hard for something and you might not get anything out of it. Okay, maybe the tornado does hit and it blows your field away. Okay, I live in the Midwest. We deal with tornadoes here, right? We just had one a week or two ago here in Missouri. We had some everywhere in Missouri was facing strong winds. But we got some tornadoes already this year. That's a little early. I think it bodes poorly for tornado season. There's probably going to be a lot of tornadoes this year. So that's the way it looks right now anyway. But we already had one here in Missouri. Okay, a tornado can ruin your work. It can ruin your investment. All right? Or here's what else could happen. Someone else might come along and reap the benefits of your hard work. Might work your tail end off for something, and someone else comes along and benefits off of that when they didn't do anything for it. Okay? Solomon whined about this all the time in Ecclesiastes. What's the point? What's the point of even doing anything? Even all the wealth I accumulate, just my kids are going to take it. I don't even get to enjoy what I've earned. And so this right here is kind of commenting on some of that attitude. It says, in the millennium someday, you will enjoy the work of your hands. Okay? It's not going to be like the curse of the current age where you can put work into something and it maybe just goes nowhere. He says, no, they shall not labor in vain. So your work is never going to be wasted in this millennial time period. And so, anyway, moving on. I have a lot of verses to get through today. We'll stay in this section of Isaiah. So, with Jesus as king, we are going to continue to pay tribute to him, kind of like how tithes work now. You know, right now we give 10% of our income to Jesus. When Jesus is king of the world, the nations will bring him tribute. If you're not familiar with that phrase, it's like you heard about this in the olden days when a king would conquer some people and he would say, I rule over you, and as part of the stipulations of my rule, you need to bring me $1 million a year, something like that. Well, anyway, people are going to be bringing tribute to Jesus, but not where Jesus is like kind of being a dictator and demanding it. People are going to bring tribute to him out of joy, out of gladness, because they are thankful for what a good king he is. And so to understand this, I'm going to read a selection of verses here, Isaiah 60, verses 4 through 9. And we'll talk about them a little bit here, but these verses it's important to know the context here. These are written to Israel about the future with King Jesus. All right? That's important to know for reasons we're going to talk about later when we talk about the prosperity preachers out there. These verses are written to Israel about the future with King Jesus. Isaiah 60, verses 4 through 9. Lift up your eyes all around and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from afar, and your daughters shall be carried on the hip. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and exult, because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah. All those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall bring good news, the praises of the Lord. These are saying, it's written to Israel. This is when Jesus is king in Israel, but king over the whole world. And it's saying, hey, Israel, I know you're down on your luck right now. You're down on your luck a lot of times. There is actually a day coming when the nations, instead of just looking at you and trying to take what they can from you, the nations are going to be bringing their wealth to you. Okay? And keep in mind here, it's not because of the glory of the Israeli people or something like that. All right? As we know from our Bibles, they got their problems. But Jesus is king in Israel, and people are bringing their riches and giving it to Israel because that's where King Jesus is. And one little note here, it says they bring gold and frankincense. And, you read that, and it probably brings to mind another story in the Bible. The story of when baby Jesus was visited by I was about to say the 3 wise men, but we actually don't know how many there were. But the wise men come to visit Jesus sometime shortly after he's born. And as you know, they bring 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And so some might read this and think, oh, this must be referring to that. Well, no, it's not. This is talking about the future. This is talking about the millennium. And you'll notice that myrrh is not mentioned. Gold and frankincense are being brought to Jesus, but not myrrh. Why is that? Well, what is myrrh? Myrrh, let me start with gold and frankincense. Gold is riches, Okay, gold is worth value. It's monetary. Frankincense, I believe it's an oil or maybe it's an incense. It's something, I'm not exactly sure what frankincense is, but I think it's an oil or something of a smell like an incense. It is very, very valuable. It is worth a lot of money. So the gold and the frankincense represent abundance and money, okay, wealth. You wouldn't just carry around frankincense unless you're wealthy. They're giving it to Jesus because they're giving him something of great value because they recognize he is a being of great value. They're honoring him. What's a baby going to do with gold and frankincense? They bring it to him as a show of respect and honor to Jesus, even as an infant. But what's the myrrh all about? Well, myrrh is a burial ointment. Myrrh is an ointment that you put on a dead body. So it's very interesting that this was brought to the Christ child, because why would you give a baby a burial ointment? It seems kind of inappropriate, right? But we see here that this was a prophetic. This was prophetic right here, that because I don't know if the wise man was being led by the Holy Spirit. I don't know why. I would like to ask him someday. Why did you bring the myrrh to the baby Jesus? It's something, but this is a spiritual prophecy taking place right here, that the myrrh was pointing to the fact that this child was born to die. I mean, yeah, everyone's going to die, but this child was born to die for the sins of the world someday. So this was a prophecy right here to give this child myrrh, a burial ointment. Now let's look at the millennial age. People are bringing their gifts to Jesus. They're bringing this and that to Jesus. They're bringing their value, their riches to Jesus, the wealth to Jesus. We see the gold, we see the frankincense, but no myrrh. All right. I felt like that guy, Billy, whatever, but wait, there's more. But there's no myrrh. No myrrh in the millennial age, because Jesus already died. He's not going to die again. So they just bring the gold and the frankincense. So you're supposed to kind of fill in the blank. What about the myrrh? Why is that not mentioned? Well, let's talk about what myrrh is. And there's not going to be a need for it. All right. There's not going to need for it in the millennial age. That was something for the first coming of Christ, but the second coming of Christ doesn't end with a cross. All right, let's keep moving. Verses 7 through 9. All the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth shall minister to you. They shall come up with acceptance on my altar, and I will beautify my beautiful house. Who are these that fly like a cloud and like doves to their windows? For the coastlands shall hope for me, the ships of Tarshish first, to bring your children from afar, their silver and gold with them, for the name of the Lord your God, and for the Holy One of Israel, because he has made you beautiful. So these people bring their riches to God, to Jesus, with gladness. They're happy to give to him. That's with gratitude, okay? They send trains of gold, trains of cash, whatever they're using in those days, some kind of currency. They're sending it to Israel each year gladly, all right? As I said before, kings used to subjugate people, and they would enforce them to pay tribute. And this is kind of like that, except it's not even enforced. It's gladly. They're willingly giving it to Jesus because they're thankful. He has made you beautiful. And so they're happy to give that to him on that basis. And I hope whenever you give your tithes, I hope whenever you pay your tithes at church, I hope you're paying your tithes. I hope you're being generous and giving back to God with what he's given you. But I hope you'll also not just give it, but give it with joy, not to give it begrudgingly, but to give your tithes and your offerings to God with joy. Whenever I do it online, I was about to say write my check, but I don't really write checks anymore. I've been able to, over the past few months, I've gotten off of checks completely, and I can do it all digitally. And so just save a little bit there on not having to buy checks. But when I give online, and it's my favorite bill, if I could call it that. It's my favorite bill to pay each month. It's not really a bill. It's something that I give willingly, but gladly. And I just hope you'll give gladly too, as you recognize what God has done for each one of us. And so I wanted to go through those verses there and mention that this was written to Israel about the future when Jesus is king, because these words, these can be taken sometimes and they can be misapplied. They can, some preachers will take these and try to apply them to our modern times. And these verses are not about our modern times. They're not about you and me. This is about Jesus and Israel in the future. And so if you don't understand the context right here of what these verses are about, some people take these and there's a verse, I don't know if we just read it or somewhere in Isaiah 60 through 66, and it's talking about the wealth of the nations will come to you. That verse is, let me see. I think that was it. And that was in verse 5. No, it is verse 5. Let me throw it back up there. So it's, no, that was the wrong section. Got too many verses from Isaiah today. All right, verse 5. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and exult because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. And I've heard preachers, these prosperity preachers before, they get up on their pulpit and they say, the wealth of the nations, that's for the Christians. This is the wealth of the nations is supposed to come to you. And, they twist this into, if you give me some money, God's going to give you some money because we're all supposed to be rich and well-fed and happy and all this stuff. And the promises, these are promises of the kingdom, promises of the future kingdom age. They're not for the modern times, okay? This is, if these were for modern times, the current age, then Jesus was really bad at it because he used to say, yeah, I have nowhere to lay my head. I don't have a house. I don't have riches. All right, I'm just a traveling, living by faith. That's what Jesus was called to do. All right, Paul went from city to city. He wasn't getting rich. All right, so if this was the goal of this present age was to get rich and let the wealth of the nations come to you, Paul wasn't any good at it. So I'd rather do what Paul was good at. I think that's what we're supposed to learn. So we can't just take this stuff and just rip it out of context and apply it to us today. It has a context and it has a proper meaning. And if you don't understand the context, you'll misapply the verses. We can twist stuff in the Bible that's not supposed to be about us, and we make it about us. All right? No, this was to future Israel with King Jesus. The wealth of the nations will come to them, not because of them, but because of who their king is. So, okay, that's the wealth part. Now let's talk about the health part. And I'm through most of my notes today. We talked about the wealth and the prosperity. Let's talk about health. So as we've established before, but maybe we should go over it again. Lifespans are going to be greatly, greatly increased in the millennial age. Isaiah 65:20, it says, no more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not fill out his days. For the young man shall die 100 years old, and the sinner 100 years old shall be accursed. All right, so here's what it's saying. In the millennial age, it's not going to be where health is so trepidatious like things have been throughout human history so far. Babies die in young infancy regularly in the world, especially in history. It's much better today, depending where you live, but throughout history, the mortality rate of newborn babies has been atrocious. In the 1500s, I looked it up, in the 1500s, at least 30% of all babies died in their first year of life. Unbelievable. 30%. Can you imagine that roll of the dice every time you have a child? Just knowing that there's a 30% chance, there's a very good chance that this child's not going to make it past the first year. And I didn't look up the statistics for how many made it to adulthood back then, but it was not great. Around 1900, so 125 years ago in the United States, about 15% of babies died in the first year. Man, that's a lot. 15 out of 100 babies didn't make it through the first year of their life. How sad. Now, you go to modern times and we've advanced so much, we've grown so much as a society, it's less than 1% of babies die in their first year. So that's good. I'm happy to hear that. But guess what? It's going to get better. Because in the millennial kingdom, there is going to be a 0% infant mortality rate. Okay? 0%. There shall no more be in it an infant who lives but a few days. All right? In the millennium, lifespans are going to be greatly increased. If you die at 100, they're going to say, oh man, he was so young. He was so young. And nobody's going to be dying of natural causes, okay? Because that's what we say now. If someone dies of natural causes, they could die in a car crash. Oh, they were so young, okay? No, everybody in the millennium is going to live out his days. They're going to live out their days. If you die at 100, it's because you did something wrong. You're probably being punished by King Jesus, who's ruling with a rod of iron, because it says the sinner 100 years old, that's someone who's put to death for rebellion. He'll be accursed. All right, for the regular Joe who's just doing what they're supposed to be doing, living for God, doing right in the millennial age, not openly sinning and rebelling against God, you don't have anything to worry about. You're not going to die. Isaiah 33:24. And no inhabitant will say, I am sick. The people who dwell there will be forgiven their iniquity. Right now, we have to deal with so much sickness and pain in this world. I mean, our bodies start falling apart about the age of 30. That's when I started having to go to a chiropractor. I think I was 29. And I woke up one morning, I couldn't turn my head to the right. Like it just wouldn't go. It didn't even hurt all that much. It wouldn't go. It was the weirdest thing. Okay, so I had to go to a chiropractor and start getting that worked out. My neck rib, there's a rib in your neck. It's called like rib number 1. I didn't know that 6 months ago, but I know it now because it's popped out twice in the past 6 months. It has popped out twice. I went to my chiropractor. He's like, I had to go 3 or 4 times before he found the problem and found that it was that rib. And so he pops it back in, and he's like, I said, what can I do to make sure that doesn't happen again? He says, psh, it is so rare that rib number 1 pops out. He says, don't even worry about it. You'd have to do something crazy to pop that out again. He's like, I see maybe 3 or 4 people a year who have that popped out. It's so unlikely that it would come out again. Don't even worry about it. Guess what? About 2 months later, I'm still having this pain in my shoulder. He feels around, popped the neck rib out again. Okay, so pray for me, guys. But someday I'm going to get past all this. I won't have to deal with these chiropractor appointments and all that. We're all going to, now, as a Christian, if you're saved now, and we've gone over this in past lessons, I'll have the glorified body. That's what I'll receive at the time of the rapture. So my body will be in the glorified state where, at the time of the rapture, I won't have to worry about chiropractor appointments anymore. And of course, that'll continue through the millennium and eternity. But for anybody, even if you weren't a Christian now, but you survived the tribulation, you go into the millennium, and you're in the world of King Jesus, or for those people who were born during that time, they are going to receive these blessings, that they're not going to have to worry about the sickness and the disease. Why is it going to be so healthy in the future world? A few different reasons. There's going to be no pollution. Okay, we have no idea how many diseases and how many cancers and all that are caused by our own pollutions, by things in our own food supply. Our food's so messed up sometimes. You can tell when you eat it. You can tell when you're eating something natural, right? We eat all this processed crap all the time, and we can just tell it's not natural, okay? It's not like fruits and vegetables. Even our fruits and vegetables don't always taste right sometimes. You can tell when you're eating something fresh, something healthy. There's just something about it. And so we eat so much processed crap nowadays that in the millennium, there's not going to be any of that. We're going to have healthy food that's good for us. It's not going to make us sick. Ezekiel 47:12. We're actually going to study this in a couple weeks here on the podcast. Ezekiel 47:12. And on the banks on both sides of the river, talking about the millennium, there will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail, but they will bear fresh fruit every month, because the water for them flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing. So these trees are going to produce fruit that doesn't fail, and it's going to be good for us, okay? It's going to be healing to us. Right now, what's RFK doing in the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again? They're getting rid of something called red dye number 5. Okay, it's in our food. It's basically poisoning us. I don't know. I know as much about that as I know about economics. Okay, I don't know very much about it at all. But guess what? None of that crap's in our food in the millennium. We're going to be healthy. All right, we're going to have the fresh fruit. And if you even start to get sick, the leaves of these trees will give you healing. Okay, you just go get some of these leaves from these. We'll talk about these trees in 2 weeks, okay? But you're going to get healed. We're going to have a pure atmosphere. I've heard it said, and I don't know if this is correct, but I've heard it said that before the flood, the oxygen was much thicker. And so the atmosphere, something changed about the atmosphere with the flood. We have less oxygen now than there was available on the world to the citizens before the flood. And that's why lifespans were so much longer before the flood. And then after the flood, you see those lifespans taper off. And so whatever that was, if there was something better about the atmosphere and the oxygen levels, it'll go back to like it was before. All right. And the lifespans will get longer and longer again. Adam and Eve, they had that perfect DNA. Now we have people with genetic mutations and all kinds of DNA problems, and people born with congenital diseases and defects. None of that stuff's going to happen in the millennium. Everyone's DNA is getting fixed. And one more thing, there's no devil, there's no demons to deal with, okay? Because we know from the scriptures that demons cause sickness and disease. We see it all throughout the Gospels that demons cause sickness, disease, blindness. There's a woman in Luke 18 who's been bound by Satan for, I think it was 18 years. Maybe it was Luke 13 or 18, somewhere in there. And bound by Satan for 18 years, she had a demonic spirit that was giving her back problems. Okay? So maybe someone needs to pray over. I don't think I'm possessed by a demon, guys. But maybe someone just needs to pray that the devil lets loose in my back or whatever, my neck issues, because he keeps popping that rib out. But guess what? If the devil is messing with people now, he's going to be locked up for the period of the millennium. And so he's not going to be able to afflict people like that in the millennial age. People aren't going to have disabilities. Okay? If you make it into the millennium in a wheelchair, well, you can leave it behind because you're going to be getting out of it pretty quickly once Jesus is on the scene. Isaiah 29:18, in that day the deaf shall hear the words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind shall see. Blind eyes are going to be opened. Okay, deaf ears are going to be opened up and people will hear. Isaiah 35:5-6, then the eyes of the blind shall be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like a deer and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. All right, so, and I just talked about that. No disabilities in the millennial age. All right, I'm going to take a quick drink, and then I'll tell you where we're going to be going over the next few weeks. Okay, whew. Doing these live, my throat gets a little raw. When I would record the episodes without doing a YouTube component, I could stop and take a drink and just edit that out. So I like doing the lives. I like being here on YouTube with you all. But then you got to sit through my when I have to stop and take a drink. Let me check our feed here. Any comments so far today? Okay, so if you have a question or a comment, you can leave it in the chat, and I'll check it in before I sign off for the day. But okay. Let's talk about where we're going to be for the next few weeks. So the podcast, like I said before, podcast is winding down. So this was episode 161. I've got 4 more episodes for you. All right. So next week, we're going to cover one more topic about the millennium. We're going to talk about the topography of the Middle East, which is going to change. And we'll talk about why that's going to be. And you probably a lot of people listening are saying, why am I supposed to care if the topography of the nation of Israel changes in the Middle East? I live over here in America or Russia or Ukraine or Brazil or wherever you're watching from. I'm just throwing out random cities or countries. You're like, why would I care about the topography of the Middle East and how it's going to change? Well, the Bible tells us about it. The Bible tells us pretty plainly that God's going to reshape the land of Israel at the second coming of Christ. And so things will be different topographically during the millennium. So if you want to learn more about that, tune in next week. However, I've been doing these Bible studies on Sunday nights, and my next 2 Sunday nights are tied up with church stuff, basically. And I don't want to just quit doing the podcast for 2 weeks. So what I'm going to do is do a Monday night live feed. So for the next 2 weeks, instead of Sunday night, the podcast is going to be live on YouTube on Monday night. And that means if you're a listener to the Cross References podcast, if you listen in audio form, you're going to get that on Tuesday morning for the next 2 weeks instead of Monday morning. Again, I'm doing this because I am trying to wrap up the podcast. I'm not trying to drag it out. Someone might say, Luke, why have you spent almost 4 years going through the book of Ezekiel? Are you just trying to drag it out? No, I want to get it done. I'm just trying to be thorough and do my due diligence here and cover every topic related to Ezekiel as we go through it. I'm not trying to drag it out, I promise. I am really trying. So I'm trying to finish it up, and that's why I'm not just going to take 2 weeks off because I can't do the live streams for a couple weeks. For the next 2 weeks, the live streams will just be on Monday. And if something changes, just watch in my YouTube feed, and I'll let you know. But expect the podcast to come out Monday on YouTube, and then Tuesday morning it'll drop on the audio form. So next week is going to be topography. In 2 weeks, we'll talk about Ezekiel 47, and that's a passage about a river, and we'll talk about what all that's all about. And then the next week will be Ezekiel 48, and that's the last chapter of Ezekiel. And then I'll probably do one more episode, 165, where if I need to finish up any more verses beyond that, I will. But I just like to take a look back also at the history of this podcast and the journey that we've been on to understand Ezekiel and his whole story. So make sure you're subscribed so you can get those episodes. And then the podcast, I'm saying it'll be done. If there's a way that you would like me to take it, if you want me to go into another book of the Bible, if you want me to restart Ezekiel, tell me, okay? Well, and if I don't hear from anyone at all, then maybe we'll just go ahead and close it down. But I would like to know, what would you like me to do? Do you want me to keep these Bible studies going? I'm enjoying the Sunday night live streams. I'm enjoying this. So if you want us to keep it going, we'll keep it going. But if not, we'll let it end. And, all good things must come to an end at some point. So this has been a good thing. I've enjoyed this time. I'm sad that it's ending, but I'm not trying to drag it out. I'm trying to wrap this up. So we're going to keep it going the next couple weeks. But for the next 2 weeks, the episodes will be a day late. That's all. I wanted to make sure you know that. As we close down, I'll just tell this short little story. So one time I worked for a Christian radio station, and we received a book it was just one of these prosperity gospel books. Okay, someone talking about, it said in the opening line, it gave a verse, it was from somewhere there in Isaiah 60 through 66, something about like the wealth of the nations coming to you, but they were making it about us, and they'd written an entire book on this theology based on promises from Isaiah 60 through 66. And as I looked it up, and I'm looking at, people would send us books because it's a Christian radio station, and we do interviews on these books. And I opened it up, and I'm like, and this was years ago, but even by then I knew Isaiah 60 through 66, this is about the millennium. It's not about right now. It's not about the Christian age or the church age. It's not about today. It's about the future. And so I'm like, this doesn't apply to us. And I knew that they were taking these verses and ripping them out of context to talk about how you are supposed to get a bunch of money, apparently. And so you read this book, you can find out how. Well, someone's going to be getting some money if you buy that book, but it's not going to be you. So, and I hadn't studied Ezekiel 60 through 66 verse by verse, but I just knew I'd studied at that point enough to know the outline of the book, and I knew that it was not promises for us today. And it's important for you to know that, even if you don't go through every book verse by verse all the time and know what, Proverbs 27:18, what that is all about, that you don't have to always know it off the top of your head, but if you can have kind of an outline in your head of what the different books of the Bible are, then you'll be able to spot it when someone's ripping something out of context and taking something about ancient Israel or taking something about the future and trying to make it about today. And we'll be talking about that a lot when we get into it. Ezekiel 47, which I've heard several sermons on in my life, but I've never heard one that actually told the truth of what it was about. And so we'll talk about that when we talk about Ezekiel 47 in the river in 2 weeks. But if you know the outline, if you know the generally like what the book is about, even if I couldn't tell you what's in Isaiah chapter 62, but I know what section of the Bible that it's in. So I know it's not something that's necessarily about me. And I need to investigate it before just assuming anything in those verses applies directly to me today. That's not how the Bible works. Okay? In the Bible, there's context. Prophecy has a timing aspect to it. And it's not whatever we want it to mean, and we activate it by faith. All right? It happens when God says it's time for it to happen. So we are not in the millennial age yet. You can say we're in the kingdom of God because we are in the kingdom. We're members of the kingdom, but this kingdom has not come down to this earth yet. So we're not in the kingdom age yet. We're ambassadors of another kingdom. And so I'm just saying, I hope you will know your Bible, because then whenever you hear bad theology, when you hear someone else ripping something out of context, well, you can slap that down as soon as you hear it, because you know what your Bible says and you understand how prophecy works, and you understand it's not always all about you. It's not all about today, but it has a context and it has a purpose and it has a timing. And so when you know your Bible well, then you know how to slap down a bad idea whenever you hear it. And I hope that the Bible does make more sense to you after today's episode. This has been Luke Taylor, and thank you again for listening to the Cross References podcast.